Hello.
Hello and welcome to that Solo Life podcast, and we're going live for the first time today. And Michelle,
Woohoo! It let me in. It let me in.
Michelle Kane is here, my co-host, and this is our very first live broadcast. So you are getting a very raw, unedited broadcast today, and we
Yes.
are joined today by a special guest who I can't seem to get in just yet. So
I see that she's joined. I can see that on the Podbean app.
She has joined us as a listener, and we need to figure out how to get her connected, but we're so excited today.
You know what, Caitlin, if you can hear us, hit the call in icon, because that's what I had to do. I had to call in. Hello, caller. So if you're able to do that, while we're waiting, I can
And talk. Here we go.
There she is.
And so today we are joined by a very special guest, Caitlin Copple Masingill, who will be talking about the riches are in the niches. Caitlin, Are you with us?
Hey, Caitlin.
Can you hear me? Hello.
We can.
Yay.
It's happening. This is happening.
Welcome, Caitlin. So glad that you could join us today.
Thanks for having me.
So our guest, listeners, is the founder of Full Swing Public Relations, and she is going to share her phenomenal experience about how she has used precision to be successful in not only launching a business, but surpassing, I'm sure, many of our expectations when we start our own agency, and share some success strategies for you. And Michelle, I don't know about you, but I'm very excited to learn from Caitlin today, especially as we stand on the precipice of a brand new decade. I'm ready to do something new. How about you?
I agree. I'm ready to hit it and make things happen. So we are so grateful to you, Caitlin, for spending some time with us, and to you, our listeners. So I guess we should just dig in. You know, we as solos, we're such a unique tribe. So we love hearing what made people take that leap into becoming a solo, because you formed Full Swing back in February of 2019. What was the deciding factor for you?
Well, I was at an agency job here in Boise that worked nationally, and felt pretty happy there in a lot of ways. And then just some things changed about the culture, and I realized it was time for me to move along down the road. And I thought, here I am, 35 at the time, and I'm like, well, I've been doing this for, a solid 15 years. Maybe it's time to take the leap and do it for myself. So I did, and I haven't looked back. And it's, definitely joining your group was one of the first moves that I made. And I remember being like, $179 or whatever is kind of a lot of money, but I was so glad I did. And I still to this day feel like I get so much value from your group. And I definitely, I'm not just saying that because I'm on your podcast. I really think it's awesome. And I've recommended so many people to join as well.
Oh, I agree. Yeah, I'm with you, Caitlin. That was one of the first things I did. I joined Solo PR Pro. To me, it was an affirmation of, there are more people like me, and they're actually doing it. That's awesome. And you had shared with us that, in the first 5 months, you nearly made your annual salary from your agency. Is that correct?
Yeah, I actually surpassed it in 5 months.
That's pretty awesome.
It's just insane to me, because I think, I think probably particularly for women, and probably, younger people as well, it's just, it's very easy to fall into this idea that you're only going to ever make this much, and you should be happy with with what you have, and you shouldn't really want too much, or you should kind of figure out a way to manage your ambition. But I was like, holy cow, now that I'm here, it kind of presents, I mean, it's exciting, and it's fun, and it's something that, even though I think it can be awkward to talk about money, I really believe, as somebody who wants to elevate other female entrepreneurs, that it's really important to talk about money, because we know so much about the wage gap and the economic situation of women is because there isn't more transparency.
Right.
I love
more
that.
of a culture of mentorship. So that's why I try to be pretty upfront about it, even though it's a little awkward to be like, hey, I made 6 figures. What up?
Yeah, and it can be, and I think that, especially in US culture, it can be really awkward, but I agree that we don't have enough financial discussions, and we tend, what I found in the decade since we have had the Solo PR Pro group, and then in my own, 2 decades plus of being in, a career, what I found is that people tend to really have these personal attachments to money and the discussion of money. And when it comes to your career and especially your own business and setting pricing, it's truly not an emotional decision. If you take the emotion out of it and look at it as a business decision, you're able to, kind of depersonalize it and take away some of those maybe, cultural or generational things that you grew up and your beliefs and attitudes about money, because we overthink it, and we make it way harder than it has to be.
Yeah, I think too, so much has just changed about our economy, and so many of us have lived through that. I went to graduate school in journalism and finished in 2007. And so, the economy was tanking and journalism was going through so many changes that I think that experience in my young adult life, being like 22 or whatever, was really pretty intense for me, and kind of shaped my feelings about career and money. Because of having gone through that. So.
Oh, yeah. I can only imagine. Yeah.
Well, yeah. Caitlin, walk us through a little bit about how you kind of structure your business. Like, what are some things that, you can share about how you work, and then we'll get to, how you, some of the secret, your secret sauce for finding success.
Finding those riches.
Thank you. Well, I would say, first of all, I don't work hourly if I can help it. I keep my hourly rate really high, and that's to incentivize people to hire me on retainer, which so far has worked pretty well. My preference, just from a cash flow, like mental health perspective, is to work on 6 or 12-month retainer. And I've been pretty successful at getting, a few core clients that are doing that with me, which is great, because I think as many of the listeners probably know, to really start to see traction and results with earned media, especially if you're starting with a client that hasn't really invested in this way before, it really does take 6 months to a year to really start seeing an impact, I think. Sometimes you can do it in a quarter, but it just kind of depends.
Right. No, that's true. It's true. It takes time and consistency, just keeping at it. So it's so much of it is educating the clients as well.
Absolutely. And I do take on the occasional fixed bid project. If somebody's really just after a strategic communications plan where that's all that they can afford, or they have, a solid in-house team, but perhaps somebody that hasn't had as much experience as, someone like me or probably other folks listening have had, I'll create that strategic communications plan and then, help onboard kind of their in-house team to implement it. But often I'm the one implementing it with the help of, at any time I have, between 3 and 5 subcontractors helping me out with different projects, but I don't have any W-2 employees, and that's intentional right now. Although I don't know if I'll stick with that forever. It just seems, I don't know. I think that there's a few reasons for that. One, I really like to support other female entrepreneurs and solopreneurs. And so I like that kind of peer-to-peer relationship that happens when it's a 1099 relationship and not a boss, worker relationship. So I like that kind of partnership vibe. And I think also just because everything's kind of happened fast, like my business, I just started in February, that I wasn't thinking at all that I'd be in a position to hire an employee at this point.
Right. And it also allows you to be, sorry, go ahead.
Well, and I was just going to say, it takes a minute to wrap your brain around what that really means. But then on the flip side, it's oh my gosh, like it would be fun to go on a real vacation where you didn't have to like check your phone all the time and like what happens if I got sick, you know what I mean? And I don't feel like my business, even though I'm proud of what I've accomplished and I do feel like it's successful, I don't feel like I'm quite there where I can just like let it run on autopilot while I like go gallivant in Europe or something.
Sure. That will come. That will come with time. And it's, working with fellow entrepreneurs, I think that probably helps you be nimble and really create the team that you need for each occasion, which is a strength of working as a solo.
Mm-hmm.
Do you agree?
It's been really fun because I've also been able to help a lot of working moms, and I have a 3-year-old, and I've had contractors work with me who are either pregnant or have very young kids, and so they have to keep kind of odd hours. But to me, it doesn't matter as long as they get the job done and do it well. And I feel like nobody works harder than like a working parent, because you just have to figure out how to juggle all that stuff.
Right. Absolutely.
So, Caitlin, as we sort of dig into the topic, it's the riches are in the niches. Tell us about that, because you have a very niched practice. Kind of explain to our listeners what that means for you and how you landed on that particular approach.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think having been an activist and worked in nonprofits and philanthropy for a good chunk of my 20s, I was thinking like, in my 30s, I'm going to be all about, does it bring me joy? Does it make me money? And those are going to be my guiding principles. And because I had done so much work on LGBTQ equality and women's economic empowerment, I was like, I really want to work on something that still feels like it's making a social impact. And I had really enjoyed working with female entrepreneurs in previous jobs and female political candidates. And so I decided that, the mission of my work in this new company was going to be to help women leaders shape and share their stories. And so that's kind of the grounding principle from which everything else has stemmed. And, initially I was thinking, oh gosh, is that enough of a niche? Or is it going to need to be even more specialized than that? Am I going to need to think about like health and wellness or, women business leaders who are particularly making, a social enterprise? But I think women leaders is enough at this point from what I've seen so far in my practice.
And that's amazing, because I believe that as some people are starting out, they almost feel like they need to be generalists. They want to go broader to be successful. And you took the completely opposite approach and then wondered if you were slicing it thin enough or if you needed to niche down even further. So I think that's a great example for people in our audience who are either kind of struggling to find their fit, or those who might be in, traditional jobs and are thinking of launching a business in this next decade. That's great thinking to know that, you can be super precise and be very successful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely.
And to me, a part of it is just knowing myself well enough that like, I think probably a lot of us who are, especially if you were a journalist and then turn into a PR person, like we kind of get bored easily. And so like, what's going to be the thing that feeds your soul and fuels you to really like get up every day and be really excited about working with the clients that you're working with? And I just know myself well enough that like the clients I have are just absolutely amazing. And it's so fun for me to be a part of their business, whether it's a shorter term project or a longer term one. It's an absolute privilege to see and be a part of helping women change the world. I love it.
Well, that's fantastic. And the one thing you say is knowing yourself well enough. And that is so key for anyone's going out on their own, is just knowing what works for you and what doesn't as you start out. Because if you know that when you start out, that's so much of the battle.
Yeah, one of the tips I was going to share, I have a few of them, but is to really invest in coaching and in your own kind of professional development. I think that can look different ways for different people. But for me, I've worked with 3 different business coaches over the course of my career, probably over the past, 5 or 10 years, and just one coach since launching Full Swing. But she was incredibly helpful just, with leveraging my Strength Finder, which I'm a huge fan of Strength Finder, and also my passions to help create the right niche for me. And so I would say that for folks listening out there, if you're passionate about like fly fishing or horseback riding or like whatever your thing is, You can tell I live in Idaho. But like, find whatever you're passionate about and then couple it with your skills and figure out how you can make the most impact.
So do you have a specific process for targeting the perfect type
I think
of
a big part of
client?
it is just figuring out how you're going to own, maintain, and demonstrate your own knowledge. So I guess that's a fancy way of saying thought leadership, right? But how are you going to put yourself out there? Because one, that's just good practice, and two, you don't want to hire a mechanic who like doesn't know how to fix cars, right? So you don't want to hire a PR person who's not doing a great job at slaying their own PR. I am constantly figuring out ways to put myself out there, whether it's speaking to, let's see, like in September, I spoke at the this major women's leadership conference about how to run for office, because I'm actually a former elected official, and it's kind of more of a hobby job than part of my practice, but I actually did just help elect Boise's first female mayor in a runoff election, which was pretty fun. So I still dabble in politics, and getting more women into positions of power is something I'm passionate about, whether it's political or business worlds. So I think, applying to speak at different things. I also just got accepted to speak at the Altitude Summit in Palm Springs in March, which is really exciting because I went to Alt Summit last year, just like, as a baby business owner, having been in business 1 month and not really sure what I was doing. And now I get to go back a year later as a speaker, which is awesome. So I think, maintaining your own blog, your own social media, all the advice you would give to clients around content marketing is all stuff you should be doing for yourself to position yourself as, somebody who's advancing the conversation in your industry and who's showing up in front of the people you want to work with.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
And so
Go
you
ahead, Karen.
said that you have several tips. So speak to those who, maybe struggling to find their way, or again, those who are looking to launch. What tips would you offer to be successful? So you have something that definitely feeds your soul, something you're passionate about, and something that you believe that you can do for a sustainable period of time. What are the next steps?
Well, definitely invest in yourself, which I kind of already touched on, but I just want to remind everyone that it's absolutely worth investing in a really, really good business coach. I'm happy if folks want to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to share more about that. I think the other thing that, and coaches can also help you a ton with this, is to always compete on value and not price. You don't want to be part of like a race to the bottom. Like sometimes I'll see, these gigs come through on, various listservs that I'm a part of. And like, if you're a sophisticated, professional PR person with, 10 to 20 years of experience, there's no reason you should be working for $50 an hour. You're worth more than that. And I think to know your worth and to be able to, in the client discovery phase and the proposals stage, really show clients like what's the cost of not taking action, what's the cost of not, working with you. I think coming at it from a place of value is just so much more a position of strength than trying to run yourself ragged, getting clients on the cheap.
Oh my gosh, we could
So
not
true.
say that enough. And sometimes I feel like we say that at Solo PR Pro and we have it on repeat, but you have to keep saying it over and over until people really tap into it and can own that message for themselves. But you're absolutely right. Some of the common mistakes that we see are people limiting the amount of money that they believe that they can make through a couple of different ways. Number one, not charging enough, feeling like starting a business makes them brand new when they have 20 years of experience. Your experience didn't just start yesterday. You just took your experience. It's kind of like you change a job. If you change a job, you're not going to tell the new company, oh, pay me less because it's my first day. You're going to make them value what you're bringing to the table. And it's not, when you are starting your own business, it's the same concept, except you no longer have to negotiate with some other entity that's holding your salary to this imaginary scale. You can go higher than you would. And value your experience and everything that you offer to a specific clientele. And it's hard, for people sometimes to get that and to really wrap their arms around it and embrace it. Their, fear kind of holds them back.
Yeah, I think it has something
Absolutely.
that definitely has to be internalized, and everyone's on a different schedule as far as that goes. So, well, here's a question, Caitlin. Do you ever take clients outside of your niches?
Not really. And part of it's been that I haven't had to. I've been able to say no to folks who feel a little bit too far afield for me.
Cool.
And I've been able to say yes to folks who I feel like fit. I would say the one, it's been kind of funny because I've taken 2 meetings now where the first thing like the male CEO says to me is like, "Would you work with me even though I'm a man?" Which always just makes me laugh because like, on so many levels, that's really funny. But
Yeah.
I'm always happy to hear someone out because to me, it's less about your gender identity, and more about like the change that you want to make in the world. Because in many ways, like gender is so 20th century, right? Because it's all a spectrum, and I feel like, especially as somebody who's part of the LGBTQ community, there's just a very I think a more nuanced understanding of gender happening now that's really healthy. But I would say that, yeah, in general, I work with unlikely entrepreneurs, female identified, or folks who have a real social impact ethos at the core of their company. I work with one law firm client that's actually my only Idaho client, that is owned by 2 men and 1 woman, and they are actively trying to dismantle the institutional barriers to women succeeding in law. And so that's been a lot of fun, even though it's 2 guys and 1 girl, helping them figure out, how you can make the practice of law more friendly to all working parents, not just working moms.
I mean, I think in a lot of ways that what people sort of miss, and it's fine to, be a little more general, but when you are focused on those niches, it also allows you to build a very solid library of success stories, right? Your case studies are all relevant.
Mm-hmm.
And the more that you build and that momentum keeps flowing, the more that you have to offer to people that meet that profile. Because now you have this, continuum of work rather than having to kind of pick through and find people who are most like you. So I think that sometimes, and it's a lot simpler when you are serving a very specific market, and this has been a big thing for me this year is decluttering, simplifying,
Mm-hmm.
making our brains be able to focus on a few things and do those few things super, super well, rather than trying to be all over the map. So do you find that because you're so precise and because you really are clear on your market, has it been less stressful than being in traditional employment for you?
That's an interesting question. I mean, I think I'm somebody who, one of my strengths, if you know the Strength Finder, is input. So I can be like a sponge and I love learning like new things about lots of different areas. And so but I haven't found, focusing on this particular niche to be limiting in any way because the diversity of entrepreneurs that I work with is so fulfilling, whether it's somebody who's an author or a rural business owner, or somebody like the CEO and co-founder of Armoire, which is a rental fashion company. And I, aside from like loving, rental fashion, I really knew nothing about it, like how the fashion industry works necessarily. So that's been really cool. I've really enjoyed like not having enough specialization to feel like I'm building up some credibility, and that progressive female entrepreneurs are starting to hopefully, hear of me, right? At least in the markets that I'm focused on. And I think that, it's in many ways, it's a small world as you start to find your niche and build in that area. I would say the other really big benefit that I've noticed is that when you have a niche, then you build media relationships within that area. And so from that standpoint, it can be really time saving because you're like, oh, I know this person there, and like, let me reach out. And you also get a sense of the awards that are out there and like the different conferences and, kind of the different areas that can sometimes be a vehicle for earned media exposure, which is pretty neat.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's true too, what you say. It eventually drills down to it to being a village where there's still a wealth of opportunity, but word gets around faster about you, which is fantastic.
Absolutely. And I want to remind people that we are live. So you're not getting any edits at all. This is really us broadcasting live for our very first time, which also means that if you have a question and you are comfortable, a legitimate question, I have to say that because sometimes you do have trolls and spam people on, but if you have a legitimate question for Caitlin, you can just hit the call-in button and you can ask your question on the air, or if you're the shy type and you still want your question answered, there's a chat box, and just feel free to type the question and we'll make sure that we address it to Caitlin. So, little programming note there.
Bueller.
So, Caitlin,
Mine hasn't chimed in yet. It's all quiet out there.
It's all quiet out there, but thank you to, I see one of our solos just popped on my screen. Hi, Janet. Janet was one of our awesome solos. And so, Caitlin, you know what's ahead in this new decade for you? I mean, your success has been phenomenal, and it hasn't even been a year yet. So have you stopped to like take that moment in, like it hasn't even been a year, and I can't believe that this is my life now.
It is. I mean, I think probably I'm not alone in this, that, my fellow overachievers, recovering perfectionists, have trouble celebrating the big wins in life. And that's definitely something that I struggle with. It's funny, I was just at the gym this morning and my coach was like so excited that, the new Boise mayor was somebody, who I'd helped get elected. And he was just like, how can you not be so excited? This is such a big deal. And I was like, I know it is a big deal. It's the first female elected mayor in Boise and she's going to do a great job. But I don't know. I feel like I sometimes move on too quickly to like whatever the next big thing is.
Right.
But I guess in terms of what I'm excited about, I'm the mom of a 3-year-old, and so having sort of the location independence has been really important to me. I live in Idaho. I grew up in Idaho, but was elsewhere for about 11 years and came back. And I do struggle with living in such a red state, frankly, and such a white state. And so it's really important to me to be raising a young boy in a way that feels responsible to me. And so I'm very committed to traveling a lot. He goes to a Spanish immersion preschool, and we're planning to spend 6 months to a year abroad in the next, 3 to 4 years before he starts first grade.
Very nice.
So that's something I'm excited about. And my spouse just went out on his own, which is pretty cool too. So now we're both kind of doing that location independent lifestyle design thing, which can be scary, especially when it comes to healthcare. But, all in all, I feel like the benefits outweigh the risk involved with just taking that leap. Because you really can create your dream life. Like right now, you don't have to wait till you retire. Because who knows what your health situation is going to be like, or, what the world's going to be like, frankly, at that point. So
that's very true.
I feel like a lot I've been telling people, that fear is not, sometimes I think people wait for fear to go away, and it doesn't. You just have to shove it over to the passenger side of the car, and, it's along for the ride, but they don't get to drive. Because quite frankly, some of the things that we do and the challenges that we take, they are scary, and it's going to be scary. And being scary means that you're stepping outside of your comfort zone and you're taking a risk. And so, you did a lot of work, and I love that you recommend working with other experts, because sometimes people are really hesitant to do that, but those investments in yourself have definitely paid off. And so for the person that might be in our audience today who is, has been saying, I kind of have this vision and have this dream of doing X, what advice would you give them?
Well, I think that, if you have the expertise and you have the vision, then sometimes you just have to go for it. There's never going to be a good time to like have a baby or run for political office or start a business. You kind of just have to put yourself out there at some point. and just be like, if not now, when, and see how it goes. Because, I think, as you said, fear is part of being human. And we all have things that we're afraid of, whether you're in a traditional employment situation where you're working, for corporate America, like you could still get fired at any time. Like the economy could tank. Like you don't know, I feel like especially post-recession, like there's just not the stability that there probably once was in the job market. And so why not try to create your own, like all the other people that are out here doing it. Like, I don't think that we're smarter than probably anyone listening. It's just that,
don't say that. I'm kidding. No, it's so true.
Like, you don't want to overthink things too much, or let the planning or the I have to have $60,000 saved before I can go out on my own, or whatever your number is. Like, don't let that stuff get in the way of actually making the leap. I mean, sure, you need to be responsible in that you need to know what you're doing and have some basic systems in place. And that's where I think a coach can really be helpful. But, other than that, it's not rocket science. It's just PR.
It's just PR.
Put that on a sticker. Well, as we talk about dreams and plans, is there one client out there that's your dream client, whether it's realistic or not?
Oh, that's such a good one. I think Armoire in many ways was that for me. I just kind of, I had used their service and learned about them from a mutual friend between the CEO and me, who lives in Seattle. And so I went out to Seattle with like the sole purpose of trying to like meet the CEO and like go to their headquarters and just see what happened.
Excellent.
And ended up getting a gig out of it. So it was great. It was really exciting. And, she was just so gracious, and she's just a lovely person, and, indulged me in like taking a selfie, which I'm like not usually that person, but I totally am that person when it comes to like rock star female CEOs. Like, if I ever meet like Amy Nelson from The Riveter or somebody like that, I'm totally gonna like selfie it up. And female politicians, but actual rock stars other than Lady Gaga, don't really care. Yeah.
Yeah, I tend to geek out over different types of people too. Like, I completely geeked out when I met someone who worked for NASA. Just such an incredible woman who had, that was the time that I was like, oh my God, can we take a selfie? Can I go live with you? She gave me stickers, and I was so like, I was like a 2-year-old kid. So yeah,
that's pretty cool.
I'd be like, hey, how are you? Maybe, but that's not really my jam.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm sorry. Somebody had just hit the call-in live button.
Oh,
it bounced up and down, and I couldn't let you in the middle of that. But if you still have a question, please hit that call-in button again, and we will take your question live. It's hard to tell if they're like accidentally doing that. Oh, there you go. There we go. Hi, caller. Please let us know your name and give us your question for Caitlin. You're on the air. Okay. Caitlin, Michelle, can you guys still hear?
I'm still here.
Okay.
I think we might have lost the caller.
Yeah. I see them.
I see them too. Okay. We are going to disconnect that caller to make room for others. Okay. The joys of being live. Well, if there are no other questions, we're going to give it a couple of more seconds, and then we are going to let Caitlin get back to her life of being fabulous and solving problems for her awesome clients. Caitlin, we're so delighted that you could join us and share of your experience. And before Michelle closes us out, I want to remind everyone that Solo Life podcast usually airs every Monday morning, and we typically record, but today is our very, very first live broadcast, which we do plan to do a little more of because this was super fun today. And we would love it if you would follow us. You can listen to our podcast on any podcast channel that you normally use, Spotify, iTunes, Overcast, whatever app or whatever device you use, we are available. And if you like That Solo Life, we love it if you would leave us a review on iTunes. Please let us know that you like us. And Also, we have a wonderful group that Caitlin and Michelle both mentioned called Solo PR Pro, and you can go to soloprpro.com and learn more about the group, follow our blog posts, learn how to join this wonderful community. And it also has all of our podcast recordings there as well. So it's kind of a one-stop shop for all things solo.
It does. It's pretty okay. Yeah, you know. No.
And I feel like for anyone listening that is on the fence, you know, like for me, it was such a relief to know that you guys were out there and that there's this group on Facebook that you literally can ask any question and there are no dumb questions, and people are so generous with their time and expertise. And I mean, I've been fortunate to meet several of the folks in the group, you know, in person or at least over the phone, you know, or video chat. And it's just been an amazing resource. So highly recommend it.
Thank you. It really is.
Yeah, it's like it's like the best staff meeting ever. And it's a nice safe space, that private Facebook group. So it's totally worth it. I can vouch for it as well. But Caitlin, thank you so much for spending time with us today and sharing your wisdom on how to get those riches in the niches. And, you know, anyone out there, if you think of questions later, you know, I'm sure we can ask Caitlin if she'd be kind enough to address them if we get some questions after the show airs.
Yeah.
But yeah, thanks for coming along on this ride, this wild ride of going live. And now that we've done it once, I think we'll probably do it again. It was pretty fun. So until next time, thanks for joining us here on That Solo Life.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Caitlin.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.